The following interview is a discussion of the results of a third-party study using drops of balance and life effects living water droplets with cannabis farming and can be applied to any agricultural sector. The study saw a steady decrease in pesticide myclobutanol throughout the growth cycle of the plant, as well as an accompanying increase in cannabinoid and terpene content. Cannabinoids are up as much as 50%, and terpenes increased 50 to 75%. Approximately 65% of the control group contained mold, while only about 10% of plants in the treatment groups did. This interview discloses how and why to use these minerals to increase plant health, growing yield, and profitability, as well as decrease fertilizer usage by 1/3. This interview is with Mark Boutwell, whose parents were the leading supervisors for Dole, which is one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the U.S. From his inside perspective, Mark also shares some of the systemic issues residing within Big Ag that you may not be aware of, and how drops of balance and sister brand Life Effects living water droplets can be used to mitigate some of these issues. Mark discusses in depth how adding drops of balance or sister brand Life Effects to the growing process can create more productive, healthier plants and growing environments, even when pesticides and fungicides are still applied. Please listen closely to the end. This information is a game changer for the health of plants, crops, and Mother Earth, as well as mankind's microbiome, health, and longevity. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on the YouTube Life Effects Living Water channel. We are with Mark Boutwell today, and this is really exciting for me because Mark has been using the minerals in Life Effects for about 12 years now in growing cannabis. And so he's in the cannabis industry and has just completed a pretty incredible study that I wanted him to share with you today. And he's graciously been very excited to do so. And so Mark is also the founder of Perfect Gardens TV, a YouTube channel devoted to successfully helping people grow cannabis. All right. So if any of you here are not aware, Life Effects Living Water Droplets and Drops of Balance are brother-sister company. We both use the same minerals and what I believe are primordial source minerals that basically restore water's innate integrity. And so Mark here has been using these minerals in his product, Drops of Balance, for quite a lot longer than I have. And his knowledge and his wisdom on the subject, I think, will come in really handy for many of you. Okay, Mark, so we'll get into it. I guess the first question I have for you today is, can you give us a little bit of your history and how you came to use the minerals in your growing applications?
Sure. I'll give a quick background history. Our family has been in a big ag for around 50 years or so. My parents developed the systems and processes for harvesting, packaging, and distributing lettuce worldwide. And in a 12-year span, technically 17, but in this Dole, specifically this corporation, they took the harvesting and packaging and distribution of lettuce from 1,400 pounds an hour to over 65,000 pounds an hour in about a 12-year span, changing, adjusting, and adapting new systems and processes into old corporations. During this entire span, though, of agriculture, my father, just like me being a young boy, he would share stories, obviously coming home off of work, and some of the stories would be, one of them would be a dog licked a pesticide cap, and the dog died 30 minutes later, and then he had to instruct his employees to spray the pesticides on the crop, right? Even though consciously knowing, in some small, like, momentary moment of asking himself, is this safe? But during that time, there wasn't protective equipment. Nowadays people are getting in respirators. They have heavy equipment actually spraying the material. So they're in some level doing safety protocols, although during that time there was no safety protocols through the developing of big ag. So our awareness around big ag and even a longer history of business, we've kind of have just realized that the monster is pretty big, and how do you solve it? And it's always kind of been a bigger approach. Now, me being a second generation, being aware of these problems, I've done my best to seek out solutions that actually start with solutions so they can scale up. And around 12, 13 years ago is when the first time minerals came into my hands, because I was looking for a source to clean water, because of how much water we were using through reverse osmosis systems in cannabis. And at this time, we had the largest indoor grow facility in the state of California. So we were using equipment. They call them reverse osmosis equipment. And during that time, the efficiencies were between a 4-to-1, and if we had a good system, it was like a 3-to-1 water to waste ratio, meaning up to 3 gallons would go through the RO system to create 1 gallon of empty water, hard water. And then at that point, we would have to add our fertilizer back into the water and then provide it to our plants. And just seeing all the water that we were wasting on a daily basis, it made me start to seek out a solution. And lo and behold, I realized that there was a void in the agricultural market, because one of some of the experiments we would do would be just how did the plants look in the water? You know, is it safe for the for plants? And I still have the pictures. I identified that when you would put just clones in the water, right? And that's a clone is where you take a branch off of another living plant called a mother, and you clone it. Normally, you'll have something called cloning gel or something, and you'll put it into a plug, and then it'll take root. What we identified just right in the very beginning, the first few days, is that um, in the controlled groups, the roots that would come off had no fibrous hairs on the root. The roots were like as sterile as you can imagine. I mean, they were just flat roots, straight roots. And you when you see hundreds and thousands of roots at this point in my life, I just thought it, especially in cannabis, I thought it was just normal. But then when I saw it, and when you cloned it in the mineral water, the drops balance and the mineral water, it would you very quickly we saw all these fibrous hairs coming off of the roots called hyphae. And I began to realize that the minerals started to create a living connection to the water much quicker, especially if the water wasn't contaminated with pollutants. And from there it has started to create a rabbit hole that it keeps getting deeper and deeper around water for the last 12 years for me in my life. And now I'm here still kind of preaching the word, telling people get tired of me talking about the minerals, but it's a solution to so many problems with water.
And I agree with you on that. Just from the 3 to 4 years that I've been working with them, it's been this incredible realization of how far gone our water supply is, even if you're drinking filtered water, alkaline water, spring water, even compared to what Mother Nature's intent originally was for the water molecule. And so I think I missed this in the intro, so I'll just go into it now. But just for any of the viewers who may not understand exactly what the minerals do, that they essentially will restructure water so that it purifies over 200 contaminants. It will literally go through a redox process, and then any dissolved solids will coagulate and flocculate from the water molecule and end up as a sediment. And so depending on the contamination within your pipes, how old your pipes are, depending on what's going through the town water supply, you could have a very light layer, or you could have quite a thick sediment at the bottom from all of this stuff, such as lead, copper, chlorine, byproducts, fluorides, and the list goes on, pharmaceuticals, ag chemicals that have leached into the water supply, because that is quite a big deal these days. And I think it's not being talked about nearly enough. And also, as a bonus from that restructuring process, the body actually gets intracellular hydration. And from what I understand regarding the plants, is they're uptaking the water and the minerals so that they can grow more efficiently. Is that accurate from your experience?
Everything you said is 100% accurate. I'm going to be a little bit technical on just a couple small words, just because it creates a vivid image in people's minds with their water. What the minerals do, they don't purify the water, they clean the water because the water's dirty. And that's what it does. It Purifying is when you remove everything out of the water. And the only reason why I wanted to be technical was just because it's when you have purified water, it's actually unhealthy water. Um, and when you have dirty water, it's also unhealthy water, but it's unhealthy because it's contaminated water, versus the other one, it's unhealthy because it's absent of minerals. And so what we're always looking for is clean water, absent of contaminants, and at the proper level of softness. Um, and when I say softness, that's when the proper ratio of minerals happens. And
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about what differences when you started using the minerals in the cannabis industry? Because the main reason for this video today is I have some people here in Australia who are starting to grow with life effects, and I wanted to support them to really understand how to get the best out of their plants, what you've noticed as a difference, and and how they can, I guess, follow in your footsteps of making the best use of these minerals.
sure, absolutely. I just to also add one more thing into that, is the where this kind of also originated is we started in food, right? So when for me in cannabis, I actually the first time I ever smoked cannabis, was when I got out of the military. And I used to do search and rescue in the military. So I was with the 212 pararescue up in Alaska. And so by the time I got out of the military, was the first time I tried it. So my point to my point to this is I was a complete newbie when I started growing cannabis. My father, different story. Me, I I had the opportunity to try something, and at that point also kind of be super hypersensitive to the this new thing I was trying for the first time, right? So I could tell if something was making me cough really hard, right? Or
Mhm.
I even they call something called dabbing, right? And when I dabbed a couple times with a large amount of oil, I was going to seizures. um and so I had various experiences with cannabis. And I had a lot of whys of why I was having it. Maybe I would start to get really bad headaches after smoking it, versus another cannabis. I was not getting any headaches, and some of them I was maybe getting super amped up and paranoid. I was getting all these really crazy experiences with cannabis. Me being a newbie, um, whatever it was, 2009 is when the first time I tried it, or 2000, yeah, 2009. And so I really started to ask why, um, as well. And so with, I guess, my point to that was, um, when researching this why, I started to learn more about cannabinoids, I started to learn more about terpenes, THC. I started to learn more about like what actually creates the experiences when you smoke cannabis. And then I started to understand that the terpenes is actually what creates the your entire experience with a cannabis plant, not the THC. um and when I started to realize that the terpenes is what is actually what the most important thing about this plant, I then started to learn, um I started to learn that terpenes actually don't really get created or start to get produced in high amounts until past the fifth, sixth week into flowering. And the healthier the plant, the larger terpene profile is what happens when the plant's healthier. So if it's not being um, introduced by contaminants, another thing also began to realize this. I know I'm kind of jumbling real quick. I want to go back to your question. um the point to why I'm pointing this out is when I started to go down all these different rabbit holes, I began to realize that when you produce when you produce a plant with a high amount of cannabinoids or and terpenes, you're actually you're actually kind of like the terpenes is directly related to the health of the plant, right? So if you're not producing a large amount of terpenes, it's actually um I realized that the cannabis industry produced a test to actually figure out the health of the plant, right? Because if it doesn't produce a large amount of terpenes, it just produces THC and a low amount of terpenes, it actually means that the plant is unhealthy. So if we smoked it, we're not experiencing the full potential of that plant, and so it could throw off everything we're experiencing on the back and the high. And then I began to realize that if we could figure out a system and process that produced a high amount of terpenes, we could hopefully transfer it over into the food production to produce healthy food, because healthy food is also a big part of uh, being healthy in general. Because I realized that cannabis is bioaccumulators. They suck up everything, heavy metals. They suck up all these things, but all plants do too. Yeah, kale, everything produces sucks up heavy metals. Um, they can't differentiate between just fertilizer and heavy metals. They'll take it all up.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, that was a little bit.
No, I understand. So, this is actually a good question to make sure the viewers understand. And everything that you're saying in regards to the study we're going to talk about and your growing experience with cannabis can be transferred to the food growing industry. Is that correct?
That's my prime what my point was, is that I didn't start off by wanting to smoke pot. I started off in this industry by accident and discovered a test to help solve the problems that our family created and help scale up in the big ag industry. And so
Okay.
that was my big point to this, is the why behind, yeah, why is this important? Why should we be using the minerals in agriculture and water to drink or for drinking? I guess that was the main point why I felt like I kind of missed in the beginning.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, and so then when you started using the minerals in your process for growing, what did you start seeing? Or would it be more helpful just to get into talking about the study?
Well, that was the aha moment. I started to see a higher terpene profile. The same strain with one not using the minerals and the one with using the minerals had a higher terpene profile. And that was, I realized earlier, prior to the minerals coming into my life, that the terpenes was actually identifying the health of the plant, the actual, like how healthy, if we call this medicine, how healthy is this medicine for us? It doesn't matter whether it's food, cannabis, whatever. We eat kale and it's full of, I think it's iron that it collects or something. It becomes toxic to us, actually. To a lot of people, they're allergic to kale, I think, if I remember straight, because of, or spinach, one or the other, because of how much iron it takes up. And it's not that it's not it's taking up the wrong iron, it's taking heavy metals, but there's a good iron and there's a bad iron, basically. Um, and I realized early on when I started to see the terpene profiles increase, I came to the realization, like, wow, if the only way we can actually solve big ag's problems is with the growers growing in cannabis, because they're the only ones willing to listen to new information right now, because big ag is so fixated on on the same systems and processes that my parents created 30-40 years ago. They haven't changed, they haven't deviated at all. So the only way for
Right.
us to influence them is through the cannabis industry right now, because
Right.
they're the growers of tomorrow. Um, all of the big ag growers right now are around 60 to 70 years old. They're all overweight. The 2%, if I remember straight, 98% of the food grown is grown by 2% of the population, right?
Mm.
Some of the largest big ag farmers in Monterey County, and Monterey County produces roughly 6% of the world's agriculture. Um, the largest corporations, and I think it's Andrew and Smith's company. And again, just because we used to know all these main owners of these corporations years ago, Andrew and Smith company, the last person that had real farming experience died 5 years ago, and the entire board that's controlling all of the distribution to Target, Walmart, all the big box, they're controlling tens of thousands of acres of farming. No one sitting on the board has any real life agricultural experience.
Right. And that's why you see all the issues with health and obesity and early death and early onset Alzheimer's because they're growing heavy metals essentially into the plants as well as all these pesticides that are being uptaken. And there's a better way. So I see completely why you've entered the market where you have.
Yeah, the 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 colleges that run the studies for the big ag so that they can implement new techniques and new instruments or technology or whatever, those studies are money the money is paid for by the large corporations like Monsanto. So they're giving the money away to the corporation, I mean to the colleges, to the students to do the tests, to provide specific information so that they can then go give it to the big ag farmers and say, listen, we have documented evidence that this is working. And it's it's just it's not third party friendly, if you can if you can think about it on introducing new ideas. And how it's all working too is the landowners that own the big ag, they lease the land to the farmers, right? So a lot of these farmers, I mean, they're not as the margins aren't as big as they if people could imagine. um and so you have this real sticky situation where these farmers just don't have a lot of room to make mistakes. And
Mm,
if they don't follow certain types of guidelines, their crops may not be insured, right?
mm.
So it's a very sticky situation kind of going all around big ag. And how do you influence how do you grow healthier plants that translates into healthier food for our society?
Yeah. And I see it as a system that's completely broken. It's broken, it's corrupt, and a new system actually needs to be started. And that's where I see people like you coming in because you're bringing new information to the world in how it can be done. So thanks
That's
for your part.
Thank you.
And so I'd love to hear about how what you actually saw in this study that you did and how
So
it came.
how can I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, you're all good. Keep going.
So what everyone always cares about cannabinoids. Same way with me too. I care about those too. It's the main money maker. Well, off three separate strains, we the control group would got an average of 13, 12, and or 11, 12, and 13%. And the finished groups was finishing off at 18, 19, and I believe one of them was close to 20%. So it's not like 100% increase in your cannabinoids. Although when you have a controlled group that is being given all the best fertilizer grown by a top-notch grower, greenhouse environments, everything that's ideal, and they're basically have increased their pocketbook because the oil is what's the valuable part in this industry, and they've basically increased it, let's say safely 30 to 40%. um that's one huge way a grower is able to stay in business and increase those profit margins. um the next thing we saw was close to like over a 99% eradication of powdery mildew and botrytis. So the test was done in Oklahoma during the peak flowering outdoor season. So anyone that's grown in that area, it's a large amount of humidity. Also grown in greenhouse environments, so it's even much more difficult to control powdery mildew. And so, how powdery mildew and botrytis start is it actually does not start on the leaf. It's powdery mildew is a white furry part that kind of grows on your leaf, and the bud rot is black mold that actually develops in the inside of the flower. For a long time, I thought, as so many other people thought, that these environments, that powdery mildew and botrytis were caused by excess humidity, and that's it's that's slightly true, but what actually happens is the um, powdery mildew and botrytis actually start in the soil, and when the poor growing environments uh, take place in the growing environment, a specific enzyme is produced in the soil that activates the powdery mildew and botrytis. So, and that's a key piece of information for some of the discoveries of this test. And so what ends up happening is we learned that when you do a foliar spray and provide the minerals at 1 ml per gallon, it completely eradicates the or stops the powdery mildew and the powdered mildew and the botrytis from even starting. Because when you, like what I was telling you with the XY axes, when you have a full set of minerals and a full set of bacteria, the bacterias can create the specific enzymes needed to do their function, and or if the specific mineral is flowing properly, then that enzyme can be produced once again. So the signal is never started for the powdery mildew spore to actually um, start in a sense. Um, and why do those happen? Well, they happen because in with a high humidity environment, um, uh, less moisture is moving around, so it becomes under oxygenated. And when it becomes under oxygenated in a stagnated environment, that's how sickness starts basically. And it only needs 24 to 72 hours for those enzyme for that stagnated air that's just more congested, if you could imagine, for things to slow down enough long enough, specific minerals actually stop flowing in the plant for the plant to start to signal, say, hey, I'm sick. And before you know it, powdery mildew or botrytis begins to start in the plant.
And so you used a foliar spray as well as watering?
Yes, foliar spray as well as watering. So for the foliar spray, we used it at a rate of 4 mLs per gallon,
Okay.
or 1 ml per liter of water,
Okay.
and we did it once a week. We also used another product called BAM. It's microbes as well. Well, let me rephrase that. For this test, we did not use the microbes. It's that product is actually something I recommend. I just recommend people always use bacteria. You can just forget that detail. I apologize. I went into autopilot for a second. For this test, it was just the minerals. It was a foliar spray at 1 ml per liter, 4 mLs per gallon, and we were running through drip irrigation at 1 ml per gallon.
Okay. All right. And
Uh,
is a drip, oh, sorry, Mark, if I
oh,
can just clarify,
yeah.
because I'm not in the cannabis industry in any way, shape, or form. When you do the drip, is that just a constant drip watering system to the plant?
Is everything's watering cycles are always dependent upon the grower. So a drip irrigation just means that there's irrigation lines running to each of the plants, and whenever they're turned on and water flowing is flowing at a certain drips per minute. So, but it
Okay,
could be
great.
different every time.
And if it's different, if the watering cycle is different for different growers, it would still be the same concentration.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Right.
What the test where we saw the 30 to 40%, and the white paper being written right now. It will probably get released by the time the video gets released. The control group that we charged the soil with the minerals. So initially, when the soil, we gave 5 mLs per gallon in the soil initially, and we charged that soil with a high amount of minerals initially, and then after that we started doing the 1 ml per gallon. That test group is the one that we saw a 35 to 40% increase in cannabinoids. The test group where we just did the minerals through drip and foliar is the test group, as well as the one we gave the soil to. Those two test groups had no mold, right?
Okay.
Um, so, um, but we didn't see as high of a jump in that test with that one. So what we came to discover, and initially and during this time, we made sure to use soil that had known levels of toxic levels of arsenic, lead, certain heavy metals. So we knew the soil was charged with specific heavy metals that were tested. And what we came to discover was that, and on a monthly basis, we were spraying three separate types of pesticides on the plants, because we were testing pesticide remediation, heavy metal remediation, was what our primary test was. So what we came to discover was, when you just use the minerals with a foliar spray and through drip irrigation, it stops heavy metals from being uptaken in the plant. The plant's healthier. Almost complete remediation of of powdery mildew and botrytis. Um, and but we didn't see a higher increase. We didn't see much of a higher increase in cannabinoids. And so what we came to realize is that when you put in known toxins, the minerals, at a 1 ml ratio and a foliar spray at that ratio, it uses up all those toxins, use up all the minerals, right? And so in that situation, there's just enough minerals in there to keep the plant healthier. So the controlled group, they lost close to 35-40% of their crop to mold. Okay. So this crop had no mold. So they still, even though we didn't see a higher, much of a higher increase in cannabinoids and terpenes, um, they were able to keep 40% of their crop versus not using it. They would have lost 40% of their crop. But the soil group, where we charged it in the beginning with 5 mLs per gallon in the beginning before transplant, then transplant did the rest, we saw a 35 to 40% increase in cannabinoids, as well as all the rest of the stuff.
Right. And were you still spraying that with pesticide and heavy
Yes.
metal time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So with the spraying, what we by so throughout the entire spraying, we're spraying every 4 weeks, as a control group. So we were able to pull tests right after a spray, and we were able to pull tests a week or two after a spray, and 3 weeks and 4 weeks after a spray. So the tests that we were pulling a few weeks after the spray, there was complete remediation, no detectable levels. But and the tests that we were pulling a day or two after the spray, we're seeing over 50% remediation of pesticides and fungicides. So I'm not trying to encourage growers to use more pesticides because that was a solution to remediate them out. Obviously, there's better fungicides and pesticides that I recommend to use either way. Um, Although what you are seeing is you were seeing a, like I said, a remediation of those pesticides and fungicides fairly quickly, only at a ratio of 1 ml per gallon.
So then were those fungicides and pesticides doing anything to the plant, or was it, even though,
Yes,
because remediated, were they actually giving any benefit to the growing process?
they were actually. So what happens is, when you put the minerals in the water, it creates a honeycomb shape in the water, and it creates more surface area, so more things can hold on to the water. So in the first 4 to 6 hours, I'd say the four yeah four for the first 4 to 6 hours, it actually, the minerals combined with the pesticides enhances the pesticides, and makes them work more efficiently, because it takes them to a nano size level. It allows them to permeate the leaves and the stomas quicker. And there's more surface area in the water for the pesticides and fungicides to hold on to. So there's so it's and less of it just kind of uh, aimlessly running off into our groundwater. Um,
Yes.
and then after around 5 hour, after around 4 to 6 hours is when the minerals begin to start kicking and remediate the pesticide out of the plant.
Okay, so you're actually getting, this is blowing my mind a bit. You're getting the benefit of the pesticide without the harm of the pesticide. Is that accurate and fair to say?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Because um yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, when you start to go through all the data and the little details, you begin to see a story that emerges from the white papers, and you're like, interesting. How is that? How's that? And you're just like, oh, okay, that's what the minerals are doing. Okay, this is the results. And then you're like, wow, okay, this is my hypothesis to the results of the test. And I look forward to releasing the test so that more people chime in on their hypothesis of what's happening as well, because this is the first of this type of test ever being done. And not to be too long-winded, I think also the putting the cannabis in the medical industry of Prop 215 back in the 1990s, it created this monster, because you're now treating a plant for the first time as a pharmaceutical pill, basically. And so it creates these standards on this plant, that all this testing has to be done. And what ends up happening now, I'm hoping what ends up happening now, is that as people smoke cannabis, they begin to be like, hey, why are all these tests being required on me, but it's not being required on all the wine growers, all the salad growers? Why don't they have to test their crops? And so my goal and hope is that the standards being forced upon the cannabis industry creates an awareness where deeper questions start to be asked and pressed upon the agriculture industry, which raises the level of standard in our farming practices in general.
Because we know it's obviously needed. Now, back to your tests for a minute in the study. Did you do any study without using the pesticides on the plants, or any group that did not have the pesticides on the plants and just growing with the mineral to see what it would produce? Or was your aim really to show what it could do for the pesticides and fungicide?
And heavy metals, yeah, that was our primary focus. Is we wanted to know in these control groups what was happening, and then all these other things um, began to emerge as they would pull tests on a weekly basis, and visual observations started to emerge. And then at the end, when you got your end crop and you have your yield differences and you realize, wow, I lost 40% of my crop to mold. Wow. And failed the mold testing while the other ones didn't. And you begin to realize, like, oh, okay, wow, it's not just the heavy metals. We got all these other benefits from this test just through visual observation.
Wow. And so then if someone were going to, if someone had a growing situation already and they had their standard practices, and I don't know what those would be, but maybe do people grow without pesticides in the cannabis industry, or is it something that they typically have to use?
Well, it's how far down the chain does the problem start? Where's the origin of the problem, right? So I'll give you an example. A farmer picks up neem oil to use. Well, where is that neem oil extracted from? Was it grown in China? If it was grown in China, you can guarantee pesticides, fungicides being used. Where's the majority of the neem oil being extracted and produced from? In what countries? So you begin to start to ask yourself the the origin of our inputs, and how those are manufactured and grown, and what type of standards are being pressed upon them before they get to the end consumer. And a lot of these things, they don't have testing practices. They have the basics. What's your NPK? Right? You go to the store, they have those. There's three numbers on the back of the bottle. They might have some in the back of in the front of the bottle. They'll have your NPK. In the back of the bottle, they'll have maybe some calcium iron, and that's in the United States. In other parts of the world, there's the practices are even more looser, so they even don't even have to put those things on the bottles because the requirements aren't required in those countries. So um, it's the problem is we're completely surrounded by the problem of toxic inputs and the demand to grow more supply because we live in a consumer waste based society.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but I do believe there are some incredible solutions coming out. So with the minerals, with life effects or drops of balance, you would essentially, no matter what practices you're using, you would recommend to add this into the protocol.
Absolutely, because where are they going to get save money right off the bat? They're going to you can normally reduce your inputs of fertilizer by a third. Okay,
Okay.
so they're saving in a third of fertilizer if you choose to go that direction. If you used to go living soil, it makes all of your bio it makes all of your living soil and your EC go more crazy. And anyone that uses living soil knows about composting and keeping everything kind of like a closed loop. So I won't go too heavy into that. But if you think about it, all the plants that you grow, the stems that you recompost, all those plants have trace minerals that get reused back into the soil. So in a sense, a lot of people don't realize this, but the harvested fruit off of a plant is actually only like 0.04% of all the minerals that the plants take up. So the majority of your crop and minerals are actually left behind in the stems, the fiber, all those things. And if you compost back to soil, most of the soil gets revitalized back to minerals. So why did I say all that? The oh yeah, one third of your fertilizer you're saving right on the get go. The next thing is um, fungicides. The minerals and more than enough studies are coming out around how specific they've discovered how specific minerals stop the enzymes that produce the mold, the bacteria, and the fungi. So when with this test, we were able to save 40% of the crop, right? So that's how much money can you save right there. Shelf life gets extended also. So you got to think about we're growing perishable items, right? And so if they have to harvest it, package it, and distribute it from Monterey County to Russia, or I mean, if you see a Dole label and that's in Europe, that means that that um, vegetable was grown in California or Arizona, and it was flown into your country within 24 to 36 hours, right?
Well,
So perishable items, when you have those minerals, the plants are healthier, the spores are it's taking longer for the spores to exist, to actually start on the thing. So yeah, longer shelf life, is more time for the grower to get to the food to the end consumer, because a third of all food actually goes to the trash.
mm,
A third of it, yeah, a third of it goes to the trash because that's how much is lost before it can even get to the end consumer. So if you can increase that shelf life, there's that the farmers want to make extra money, and that's a huge part, right? They just need to be able to salvage a third of what's going to the trash.
right.
The the next thing is um the health of the food. We've come to discover that when you have a healthy microbiome, you get full faster, right? When you're
Mhm.
eating food that is dense in nutrition, you don't eat as much. But the only reason, one of the reasons why we eat so much is because our body and the signals in our stomach haven't identified that it's eaten enough to say the mind to tell the mind it's not to stop eating because it's full, right? So
Mm.
we create more nutrient dense food. People, obesity, all those things decrease just because people are getting full faster.
Mm.
Um, so then we have, but just talking about the farmer, we're talking about a third of the fertilizer. We're talking about potentially a third of the crop being wasted. Oh, we're talking about now when you go to any large corporation, on the bottom line, there's always a line item for safety and protective equipment, all the goggles and the gear and all the hazardous material that the protective equipment that has to be used and thrown away immediately after to protect the people using these pesticides and fungicides. That doesn't have to be used anymore. Then the liability of using these pesticides and fungicides, of the lawsuits, of the people being getting sick after using these things, the field workers going into the fields after these things are sprayed, and then these people developing problems year round or later in their life. And the only reason why it doesn't come back to bite the farmers in the butt yet is because they source their help from third world countries as temporary work visas, and then after the season, those people go home. They don't have anyone to report the problem to, right? As it begins to develop later in their life. So for farmers, if one of the biggest things is freeing yourself from liability of lawsuit. That's huge.
Mhm.
That hopefully should make you fall asleep a little bit easier at night. Um, then if the awareness of the problem of pesticides and fungicides ever emerges in the food industry, and demand for healthier food actually begins to take hold. I mean, when I say take hold, people actually understand the problem and demand food grown with healthier means. Um, that then that means that their food, they're saying their food up to actually be uh compliant in the new emerging markets that I foresee to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. So those are just a few of the areas I see. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but I don't think so.
Yeah, I see that as well, is that starting with these minerals now, you are going to get a jump on the game that's going to come down, which is people are going to start recognizing how damaging these pesticides and fungicides have been for our health and our environment. And there's going to be an upsurge of new practices coming in. So if you've got if you've got a conventional setup, you've basically told us how people could incorporate the minerals in their cannabis growing or their agricultural growing, whether that's lettuce or carrots or potatoes, correct? The soil remediation aspect, have you done a lot of that? Because I'm thinking about the root vegetables in particular, the carrots and the
Hmm.
potatoes that are grown in soil that are literally teeming with the residue of pesticides.
Hmm.
When you guys did this study, did you test the soil at all?
Absolutely. That's what which was part of the test. What we can come to, which we actually came to discover, was that all of the heavy metals and the pesticides, and well, the pesticides and fungicides were remediated, so they're no longer detectable. The heavy metals got locked up in the soil, so they changed their form, so they are no longer water soluble. So they became a rock. They're no longer toxic to you, to your environment. And that's what the minerals do originally, as their original one of their original purposes 30 years ago, when they're originally discovered for as solving that problem.
So, because I saw a UN study that showed some basic numbers and basic facts on how it could remediate in the soil, but it sounds like you've gone a real, not a step, but like a leap further in showing that the pesticides and fungicides disappeared. Is that what you're saying? Because that's massive.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're saying. What and again, the white paper is being written. This test was done by a third party analyst, so I didn't get access to I didn't get access to influence the studies. Whatever the results are going to be the results. I've been just getting the information as it's been getting relayed to me. It'll be provided in an actual document, so which I recommend is to go over there, read it yourself. To my understanding, what I have learned is that if the pesticide is immediate, because the original concentration to completely remediate these pesticides and fungicides out of regular drinking water is at a ratio of 5 mLs up to 6 mLs per gallon, or 4 to 6 mLs per gallon of water. So we're using at a ratio of 1 ml per gallon, right? And
That was your,
so, go ahead.
sorry, your ratio was 1 ml per gallon.
Is the through the drip irrigation, and then
Okay.
4 mLs per gallon as a foliar spray once a week. So
Okay.
a much lower level, and so it would make sense that it's going to take longer for the pesticides and the fungicides to remediate out of the soil, and that's what we saw. With if you took a test a few days after the test, we only saw around a 50% remediation of the pesticides and fungicide. But if you took the test 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, there was a complete remediation out of the plant, when normally the pesticide or the fungicide will stay in the plant from seed to harvest.
Mhm.
So we're taking something that could not be remediated, it even because these pesticides, fungicides, and heavy metals in the extraction part of the cannabis industry is actually when the problem begins to really poke its head out. Only a few crops so far have been regulated around heavy metals, pesticides, and fungicides testing. It's really the consolidation of the oil off the plant into crude oil or into a distillate oil is when we see normally extremely high levels of these pesticides, because as you consolidate it down, it becomes more concentrated. Um, uh, so so if you're able to, like, we are, not to beat the dead horse, but if you're able to not even allow the plant to take up the pesticide at all or remediate it within an X amount of time, then it solves the extraction industry parts of the problem. And that's the same for everything, though, for all industries. It's whether it's beet juice or it's carrot juice or it's apple juice, it all gets extracted. All vegetables get extracted as a way of preserving the food to get to the end consumer at some point.
Yes. And just on a little side note, I saw someone who had taken strawberries and pressed them, and then they had enough pesticide to go from the strawberry juice to go and
And
take care of the crop.
respray it again.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
no.
it is a massive problem, and I'm just blown away that you've got this hard proof, because it's something I've known. Like, I've known very clearly that these minerals can do the job and reverse the problems that we've put into society by our lack of education and awareness. And now that you've got this real incredible test that will, I think, absolutely provoke more studies and tests. And for those growers who are on the leading edge, they're going to start uptaking, with any luck, the minerals in their processes, producing a healthier product for their end users and saving them money. It's a win-win-win all around.
It is. I mean, nitrogen costs are dramatically increasing post-COVID. I apologize, post-COVID, and you're having, yeah, high inflation happening across the board, instabilities of money. Farmers, when you buy these fertilizers and these pesticides, it's not just, it's an asset to your crop. If you could save it year after year and not use as much of it, and it creates less problems, groundwater problems down the road, that you're going to have to pump from that groundwater the following year. Um, it's it, it creates a long-term solution, because even 10 years down the road, when you have a healthy soil, it actually keeps the humic layer um, more intact, and the humic layer obviously is your soil, so you're not getting dust bowls. Another thing also, what we've discovered and what was seen through visual observation, is less calcification buildup. That's also a huge problem with farmers, is a layer of salt builds up on the top layer of their soil, um, and through excess calcium or lime, and they normally have to go in and break it all up, which creates more workload to get the crops planted. we're seeing less of that build up as well, just because when you add in more trace minerals, it's really interesting what ends up happening. And I discovered this in the cannabis industry as well. When you isolate the cannabis oil all the way down to THC, it becomes an isolate. But then when you add like isolate like a powder, right? So it goes from a liquid, an oil liquid, down to a powder. But then when you add back terpenes or heat, that powder becomes more viscous, and it becomes a liquid again. The same thing happens. Common molecules bind together. So when you have excess amounts of calcium or excess amounts of certain types of fertilizer, they bind, create this salt layer on the top of your soil. So one of the best ways to break it up is to increase your trace minerals, and when you increase your trace minerals, the common molecules actually can't bind together because they're in an environment that, yeah, they're not so common anymore, because common molecules bind together. When you increase the trace minerals, those common molecules, they're not so densely compacted, so they never become like soap scum on your shower, basically.
Mm. Mm. And so, what other application do you see in the future for these minerals? I mean, you've got the environmental remediation, which I think is massive. I can see this going through wastewater systems back out into recycled water
Hmm.
and being spread over the environment in the recycled water process. To me, that's just, it seems to be a no-brainer. Is that something that you could see, or what else do you see? What else do you see as a practical application?
Well, water is God's solvent, right? Is
Mm.
we have VOCs because plastic particulates or our carbon emission is coming off, and I'm not one for electric cars in any level. They have their part, but I what I am saying is our not our biocarbons, but our the carbon that's coming out of our fuel exhausts, right? All these things circulate back up in the air, and they become water soluble. So what are we talking about? Like, how do you get rid of plastics, right? Well, that's a huge problem. Well, for me, I mean, when I become a dreamer and I just dream for 5-10 minutes, I think about melting down all the plastics and burning them, and then having that exhaust into water, and then you use the minerals to restructure that water, so all those particulates come back into sulfated minerals, and it's a way of completely purging this world of plastics in general. um, I think about using the minerals as a vising, as an alternative for vising products for eyedroppers, right? I think about using the product um, as a way of converting a conventional farm to a certified, OMRI certified or organic farm. Every country has their own um, certification process, but turning a commercial farm that's been fertilized pesticide into a living soil natural farm within 6 months, where worms are flourishing, and your soil goes from light brown rocky to flourishing compostable um soil, that obviously it can't just be the minerals, it would be a assortment of things, but when you introduce the minerals, it neutralizes all of the things that actually make bacteria dormant. So when you neutralize the thing that makes the bacteria dormant, the bacteria can actually then come back in and the bacteria and the fungi can come in and start to create the fibrous hairs needed to actually hold your humic layer together. That's the reason why your humic layer actually falls apart, is because that fibrous hairs the bacteria and the fungi create over time um, go away, because the bacteria go dormant, because after roughly 900 parts per million is and pesticides and fungicides, they, like, once again, make the bacteria go dormant. Yeah, because that's what these things do. They actually, scientists try to create these pesticides and these fungicides and these chemicals to replace the function that the bacteria do for us. So when you use them, you're telling the bacteria that you don't need them.
Mm. Which obviously isn't the case because it produces systemic chain reaction, in which our ecosystem gets out of balance, whether that's in the physicality of the body or Mother Earth. And I think for a lot of people who may be watching this or sharing this, it's like the solutions are already here. We just need to, as a society or as an individual, start to uptake the solutions so that we can provide a more balanced ecosystems for ourselves, our families, future generations. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. It's eye-opening for me on another level, and I'm sure will be for a lot of the people who are watching this. Can I ask you very specifically, if there's other things that you also want to share, please do. But I think specifically to introduce to the growing process of cannabis is pretty easy. It seems to me that you've already stated that. Is there anything that we've missed?
And well, well, it's not what we missed. What I well, yes, what we have what we're going to miss if we don't take advantage of this opportunity. If we don't take advantage of if we don't take advantage of treating the cannabis industry as our new R&D facility for the agriculture industry, and we don't listen and extract the value of the information coming out of this industry, because as of this point, for the last 20-30 years, 1 gram of this has been worth anywhere from $10 to $20, even $40-50. I mean, some of the 1 gram of it, if it's coated in oil and all the fancy stuff, yeah, 1 gram of it could be $1,000, $2,000, right?
Wow.
So they really care. The cannabis industry really cares about how well you can grow this plant, because you're just aren't judged. You just don't get paid on the yield of the crop. You actually get bonuses for the quality of the crop, right? And that's very different for food. For food, it's all about the weight, all about the biomass. For the
Mm.
industry, it's created a new level of standard on a value pricing because of the quality. And the food industry is starting to catch up a little bit because they're calling it organic and all these other certifications, but they're still they've created a new dimension around the value of it. So my point of this is, if we do not examine the benefits coming out of the cannabis industry, all these new growers, these new mindsets getting involved. I mean, you have mechanics, plumbers, electricians. You have grandmas that have been growing in their gardens for years. I mean, engineers, mechanics. You have the melting pot of a consortium of different types of mindsets from different industries that all have secretly loved this plant from the day they got started on it. Okay, and it's this melting pot of ideas and thought processes, and if we don't
Mm.
extract this new information coming out, um, and begin to apply it at a bigger level, that's what we're going to miss. And the three areas I think that we have a chance to adapt new ideas are going to be the minerals, trace minerals specifically, um, the benefit of bacterias, the benefit of fungi, and um, and higher quality pesticides and fungicides that are less intrusive to our soil biology. If anything, they are working in harmony together versus against each other.
Mm. That's amazing, Mark. I think that you've got such a platform to create change, and I'm really thankful to have been able to talk to you today. Um, I think unless there's anything else you want to say to wrap it up for today, and I think we may do a follow-up call in the future.
Thank you guys for your patience.
Yeah.
I'm sorry this was so winded. This was actually the first time I have publicly given out any of this information. Like I said, we just finished this test up like a couple weeks ago. So thank you for allowing me to vent, I guess, some of this information out. And hopefully in the future it'll be better organized and a little quicker to the point.
Okay, thank you so much, because I feel like you're getting your head around everything that's just occurred, and I'm getting my head around it as well, and it makes me so excited, and to get the firsthand information is gold, and I appreciate it so much. And I think if anyone is interested in adopting these minerals in the form of drops of balance or life effects, or if you are a large scale agricultural producer or cannabis producer, you can contact Mark in the US or me in Australia, and we can get started. I'll put our links in the section in YouTube where the comments or the notes are, the show notes, and you can get right in touch with us. Or go to the websites and have a look, and we'll have an affiliate code, a coupon code as well, so that Mark and I can also share in the win-win-win situation, because I think this is, important to say, is that Mark is passionate about education. I am passionate about education, and all we want to do is deliver this information so that we can make this change. And right now, I know, at least I'll speak for myself, is that I've had a hard time with the whole capitalistic society and ideologies of the world that we live in, but recognize that this is where we're at. So this is where we have to proceed from. So if you could use the affiliate links, it would really benefit Mark and myself in getting this word out and getting these minerals out, to really just give this planet and these people another life. And that's how I see it, is that we are going from our original state of one with the universe and with source and with the earth, and then we've moved into a time of such imbalance, and now this is where the pendulum's swinging, as we're going back into that state of balance, and this is just one of the many ways that we can get there. So thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time.
Make sure also to use Zara's affiliate code on the Drops Balance side. For anyone that's gotten to the end of this, I will include some extra free goodies, but I will only do that by including Zara's link into our affiliate code on our side, so I can know who's coming from.
Yeah, and we'll do the same for you, Mark, as well. So we'll have all those details in the comment section. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to either one of us. Okay, thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Life Effects living water droplets and drops of balance use the same primordial source minerals. If you are in the US, you can save on shipping costs and delivery time by ordering with drops of balance. If you are in Australia, it's optimal to order with Life Effects living water droplets. Use either website to order from overseas locations. You can find the appropriate affiliate links that include product discounts in the show notes below, as well as contact details for Mark and myself if you are interested in more information or bulk or industrial size quantities. The applications for Life Effects and Drops of Balance extend outside of agriculture into drinking water, swimming pools, hot tubs, aquaculture, wastewater treatment, and environmental remediation. May we together participate in this wave of regeneration destined for the planet and her people.